Will you pray with me? May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, neither you nor anyone in your household. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in it, but God rested on the seventh day. Today we start stewardship season, everyone's favorite time in the church calendar, a period when we practice giving our time and our gifts and our money to God through the ministry of this particular congregation. And since this year's stewardship season is centered around the practice of Sabbath, today we start with rest. Rest, which is admittedly a strange way to start a pledge drive. This is a time to be active, isn't it? To do more, to give more, to inspire and encourage one another to deeper relationships with God and one another, to more faithful ministry in the church and community. And we will get to all those things, don't you worry. But contrary to all of our impulses, Sabbath asks us to begin by stopping and taking a deep breath, taking time to rest. God rested, and so can we. God rested, and so must we. Many of us today think of Sabbath in terms of long church services and blue walls, right? But that's not the heart and soul of Sabbath. And that's not how it came to be. Old Testament scholar Walter Brueggemann looks back to the story of ancient Israel, and he finds that Sabbath is actually an act of protest against those forces that wage war on our souls. Brueggemann calls Sabbath, quote, a political assertion of disengagement from an economic system of productivity that never has enough. Which means, friends, that for us today, for them then and for us today, Sabbath is the antidote on one hand to toxic productivity, and on another hand to fear and chaos. So chronologically, Sabbath actually first shows up in the wilderness after God has brought the Hebrew people up out of Egypt, where for generations they were slaves, performing back-breaking work for Pharaoh from sunrise to sunset, 7 days a week. As we know well from our own nation's history, slavery turns people into economic resources, persons into productivity machines. So when God sets the Hebrew people free, God says, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. You were once slaves in a system that demanded everything from you and more. But now you will worship God through rest. 1 day a week, you will stop all your striving, disengage from the rat race, and simply delight in the life that God has given you. Sabbath rest is the antidote to our culture of toxic productivity. Toxic productivity. We know a thing or two about that, don't we? The tasks have changed from ancient Israel to today, but the rat race is much the same. We too live in a 24/7 cycle of news, of work, of chores, of demands from family, friends, society. Just this last week, you may have seen a panel of medical experts recommended that we start screening all Americans 65 and under for anxiety, citing extraordinary collective stress on all of us in recent years. And honestly, all I can think is, why stop at 65? The world says, do more, be more, give more, bigger, better, faster, stronger, now, now, now. But God says, stop, rest, breathe in, breathe out. You are not the sum of your labor. Your worth is not based in your productivity. We are human beings, not human doings. We are created in God's image. Receive the gift of Sabbath and rest. We are indeed created in God's image, which brings us to Genesis chapter 2 that Wolfgang read part of for us, where Sabbath is an antidote, but this time not to toxic productivity, but to chaos and fear. Now, the story comes first in the pages of our Bible, Genesis 1 and 2, but actually it was written down centuries after the stories we hear in Exodus. Genesis 1 and 2 come from the time known as the Babylonian exile. It's a litany. We've all heard it, haven't we? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And it was written in a time when the people of Israel were living in utter chaos. The unthinkable had happened. A foreign nation had invaded and laid waste to their whole life. Leaders gone, temple gone, friends and family gone. How could they sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? Chaos and fear are the order of the day as far as the eye can see. But the prophets and the poets can always see just a little further. They have faith that Babylon is not the end of God's story, that God is not done with God's people yet. So they start to tell a story to the people in exile about how God created order out of chaos, how God's Spirit moved over the face of the deep and separated the light from darkness, land from sea, sun from moon, from stars above. About how God danced and spoke creation into being for 6 days, not literal days, this is a poem. And then on the seventh day, as the culmination of everything, God rests. And it's not that the Sabbath rest comes after creation. No. Rest is an essential part of creation itself. Sabbath rest is in fact one more way that God makes order out of chaos, light out of darkness. And so we, the ones made in God's image, are also called to rest. For rest is the antidote to fear. Rest is the triumph of order over chaos. Now that may sound all wrong, but just think for a moment of the chaos that we create, self included, by refusing to rest. The chaos of constantly working, of repeatedly checking our phone, of trying to do everything all at once, of trying to keep all those balls in the air. Constant activity is chaos. And what's more than that, it's not the creation that God intends. When we stop and rest, when we observe the Sabbath day and keep it holy, we acknowledge that it is God, not us, who's in control. That the world is in God's hands, not in ours, thanks be to God. We confess that our lives and our well-being, the good of the world, does not depend on our own feverish activity and grasping for security, but simply on God's goodness. Today, as in Babylon, Sabbath rest says, despite all appearances to the contrary, we trust that God is in control. Today, as in Babylon, Sabbath rest says, we still trust that God will bring us home. And God did, and God does, and God will. So today, we start stewardship season with rest. Instead of crying more, we start by saying enough. There is enough. There will be enough. God will provide enough. God always has and always will. We stop. We rest. And friends, this is hard stuff, isn't it? Our world works on a scarcity mentality. And if we're honest with ourselves, we kind of like that feeling of toxic productivity, don't we? We're a little bit addicted to our own chaos. We're used to a 24/7 cycle of doing, and I, at least, I don't know about you, but I get a little high on thinking that I am in control. Did you see me plugging things in before worship? God created the world in 6 days, lovely, but look at what we can do in a 24/7 world. Into this chaotic mess of productivity and doing, God gives us Sabbath. First, rest. Enjoy. Stop and marvel at all that is good. Yes, it's counterintuitive. Yes, it goes against the grain of our well-developed Protestant work ethics. And that is exactly why God commands it. That is the logic of grace. Friends, we trust that there will be enough, and then we give. We know that God will provide for us, therefore, we dare to be generous. There's plenty of work to do. And hear you me, we will get to that. But first, we rest. We look around at this world, at this church, at this life that God has given us, and we see that it is good. Rest, delight, enjoy. Tomorrow, we'll get back to work. Thanks be to God.